Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Dr. Cognetta here, CEO, proud CEO of Allegiance Team Academy. We have some staff on here as well, and I know quite a few of you parents, so around 100 of us on here right now. For friends and family who are missing this, I do let them know that it's being recorded and we'll upload it to ASA TV as soon as we can. Thanks for joining us. We'll jump right into some info for you tonight, and then hopefully add some clarification on just a lot that's going on just a few weeks into the school year. And we'd love some time for some Q&A. Any questions that we can't answer, just don't have the answers to, we'll let you know, and we'll jot them down and make sure we can get to them when that first chance. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and present my screen and we'll get started. Right, let's get this going. So a few things we want to share, just some updates and reminders for where we are in the school year. We want to talk a bit about the health protocols and kind of drill down specifically to what's been going on as we see positive cases. Make sure we can hopefully get you some clarity around that. And then, then after that, it's some time for some Q&A. So it looks like just 3 bullet items on the agenda. A couple of those, just have some layers to them. So we'll go right in there. And then again, we will save time for questions and answers at the end. A couple of the important updates just for pickup and drop off, just reminders, please avoid parking on school side of C Street, either during drop off or pickup. It really does back up the traffic, and it actually makes it a little bit, quite a bit unsafe. So thank you for everyone kind of finding their stride here. As you noticed, when we've been clocking it, both drop off and pickup are getting considerably quicker. And I know for some of you, that means getting there earlier. Just be mindful if you're picking up on a later later pickup time or dismissal time, that you don't want to get there too early and delay the pickup for younger grades. So naturally, you're kind of figuring out your sweet spot of time of arriving because it's getting much smoother on both ends of drop off and pickup. And a reminder for the front of school on C Street, you want to drop off all the way forward almost to our parking lot. So that the second grass kind of area there, just in front of the marquee, in front of the den, that's your drop off spot. I know sometimes you're waiting closer to the intersection on Oaks and C Street and you're not there yet. I understand that, but it does move smoother if you just wait until you pass the crosswalk and then drop off there. That helps with the traffic behind you tremendously. So please avoid parking on school side of C Street. And then the other thing is, please do not park in our neighbors' driveways. We know it gets congested out there, but we've worked really hard to have a great relationship with our neighbors. We want to keep that, and that's on all of us. So thanks. Hopefully you agree with me that from the first day of school to today, it's only gotten smoother as far as drop off and pickup go. And thanks for your input and helping us kind of fix the minor little tweaks that needed to be done to get that to be smooth. And hopefully you've noticed what we've noticed, that it's gotten considerably better in just a few short weeks. And keep in mind, this is 900 students. It's not, small numbers. That's a lot of kids to get on and off campus, and you're helping make it smooth and safe. So thank you for that. Other thank yous, for just where we are, just a few weeks into the school year, and we know there's a lot of layers to school right now. Our number one priority remains keeping your kids safe, and close second to that is keeping the school open. So I know that doesn't always intuitively make sense with some of the decisions or things that we're vetting as we're trying to figure out what is possible and what's necessary, what's possible, everything in between at the school. But those are really driving our decisions there. And we live in interesting times. We're not a lot of the things that end up being realized are intuitively that easy to kind of wrap our heads around. So we understand that, but do trust that as a school, as a staff, we're spending quite a bit of time vetting the pros and cons of any decision, and with those two priorities in mind. So thank you for understanding and patience with that. And also want to just recognize that I've said this before, I've said it at board meetings, I've said it in forums like this. Another important thing to kind of acknowledge about who we are as a community is that we are truly diverse. I know on this call alone, there are people with very different views of what the school should be, and maybe schools in general should be doing at this time, in response to, to all things going around regarding COVID, health restrictions, et cetera. I know that we have divergent positions on that, just on this call alone. I also want to say that for us, those positions are not irrelevant, but they're not driving our decisions. We are limited to what we are required to do. And for us to keep our school open, to stay on the El Rancho campus, we have to adhere to the current health guidance. So for some of you, and I've heard from you, that is inadequate. It's not enough in your opinion. And for others, it's an overreach. So examples, for some of you, you'd prefer that kids were required to wear masks outdoors. That's not in the guidance. For others, you prefer to see kids not wear masks at all. Also not in the guidance. So we understand that those positions and countless others exist in this community. We respect them, but I hope you hear us on our priority is keeping the school open, and you're seeing us do what is necessary to do that. And of course, at all times, keeping your kids safe. But this commentary pertains to keeping the school open. And so I just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody. So thank you for that. And that's what we're going to kind of dive into. So first important reminder on the updates is our traffic flow. Thank you for making it better. And reminders around things that are easy to avoid and help with the flow and safety and our relationship with our neighbors. I want to give you a little data because there's been a lot of discussion around what's going on in the last 2 weeks. In the first 2 weeks of school, we've sent out 3 notifications around positive cases in our community. We're obligated to do that. So I want to give you a little context because for some of you, all you heard so far are the fact that we have had 3 positive cases in our community. And what that means is since school has started, there have been 3 individuals for part of the school day or part of the work day on campus and finding out that they were positive. So a little context, a little bit bigger picture. On last Monday, there was a voluntary staff test. Close to 1/3 of the staff participated. It was voluntary. And out of those, 100% of the results were negative. So just giving you a little data there so we kind of have a bigger picture. In the first 2 weeks of school, we've had over 120 illness-related absences. This means somebody has stayed home because they've had COVID-like symptoms or were sent home because of symptoms. And again, that's in the guidance, and we're going to stick to it. I'll share why in a moment. Over 120, that's definitely a pretty high number, and important to kind of know, like, it's a good number of kids, right, that have been either stayed home because you have followed our daily screener, or you have were notified by the school that we saw the symptoms and then therefore are sending the kiddos home. And we understand that right now we may be, obviously erring on the side of caution for sure. And in some cases, we'll learn more about the students being, maybe it's an allergy. It's another reason on why the symptom is presenting itself. And as we figure that out and know, then, we'll have a better understanding on when we have to, adhere to the protocol and when the protocol, we're still adhering to it, but when we know that there's a different reason as to why the symptoms may be presenting. But I think, in the grand scheme of things, you'd probably prefer for us to err on the side of caution. That's what we're doing. And thank you for doing the same by following the daily health screening, daily COVID assessment, which I'll display momentarily as well. And that has led to quite a high number of absences in the first 2 weeks. Not all of those 120 have been tested, but the majority that have tested negative. So a little perspective there. And that's just as of Friday. We know we had others testing for the second time, which would probably bring that number up to even more negative tests. And in all that, there have been 3 positive cases in our community since the school year has started. In each of these cases, we learned through contact tracing that the exposure was not at school. The exposure was someone in the home, someone in the family, and so on. So hopefully your takeaway is, so far, our experience has been that individuals have unintentionally come to school with COVID. We don't have anything to support the idea that it's being transmitted at school. That'll probably change. We've got a lot of days, school days ahead of us, and that may not hold true for the rest of the school year. But just so you understand, as we've kind of investigated and talked to individuals and talked to staff and observed what's going on, we have yet to see a positive case where in that same classroom, then other cases have emerged. That hasn't been the case. These 3 cases are not connected to one another. In each instance, there's been exposure at the home. So again, another takeaway is what we already saw in the data before we ever opened, that the transmission rate at schools is often more frequently lower than in the general community. We're seeing that, in the short few weeks of school. So I want to reassure you that this is happening because we are taking the right precautions. We are following the guidance. We are doing common sense things like keeping our doors open so there's strong ventilation. Kids are washing their hands frequently, we're sanitizing. And yeah, if masks come off indoors, then we remind them, you need to put that back on and so on. We're common sense approach. We're not punitive. We're not shaming anyone. And nothing we're doing is perfect. Nothing that's recommended or required in the guidance is perfect. It's all based on the fact that, for us, it's based on the fact that we want to do our part to make sure this school stays open for you and your children. So a little context there on that data. So we have, we've always reserved the opportunity to schedule voluntary student testing, and we have scheduled one. Right now it's scheduled for this Friday. More details will go out tomorrow on it. The voluntary student testing is that it's voluntary. It's taking place after school on Friday. We'll email you the information so that you can prepare forms and so on if you'd like to have your child participate. Right now, it's only for students. So this study is not for adults, it's just for students. It's taking place after school. We'll give you the details as to where, when. It actually coincides with Spirit Wear Sale and a Mountain Mike's pizza fundraiser. So you can make a full day of it if it makes sense for you, and kind of couple that all together. But it is taking place after school, which means that parents, it'll be on you to prepare the forms that are required. Bring your child between the testing hours and participate in testing. So you should choose to. The thing to keep in mind, because this is school related, we do get the student results. We don't share them with anyone. They're ours. You also get your child's results as well. This is the same organization that we've used in the past, that we recently used for staff. And within a day, we were getting results. Now, the lab does not promise 24-hour turnaround. They say, about 48 hours, but so far, every time we've used them, they've been pretty quick to get us results. So we'll have results. We will not share individual results with anyone. You get your child result directly from the lab, and we don't share your results with anyone else. Should the results include positive cases, then we'll know who the person and the student is, and we'll contact trace. We'll understand, we'll have a better sense of where the exposures, if any, existed, and then we'll communicate like we had for the previous cases to the community. So there's a couple scenarios here. There's the possibility that there are 0 negative cases. That is very likely. There's also the possibility that there are some positive cases, and if you're bringing them on the voluntary testing, one of 2 reasons. You may bring them because you heard your kid is a little sniffly and you're wondering if want to kind of have peace of mind, or your kid's asymptomatic, but that maybe they were in a classroom where we sent a notice out, and you may want to have them test for whatever your reasons are. Those are the 2 scenarios, right? We may have nothing but negative cases, or learn of positive cases, which are probably going to be asymptomatic. And we kind of weighed the pros and cons of this, because there are testing opportunities outside of Allegiance, which will also push. Our awesome health tech, Gina, is pushing out resources shortly on testing centers in the community. So we want to give this, use this administration to kind of get a sense. We're a few weeks into school. We know of the positive cases. Are there more, is essentially what we want to answer, and then kind of take it from there. More information is just better than less, right? So that'll take place this Friday. We'll push out more details tomorrow. So if you're interested in participating in that, you'll have everything you need to do so. So shifting gears into the health protocols we want to talk about. Whoa, I moved too fast. So we'll cover, again, the current health guidance, which comes to us from the California Department of Public Health. And again, in our agreement with the school district, we are required to implement the health guidance. It's not an option for us, it's required of us. We'll talk a little bit about how positive cases are determined, the notifications that have gone out and why they go out, and the quarantine recommendations, and then what it's like to return to school. So we have a revisit of that. So let's talk about the current health guidance. New as of August 11th is you may have heard it in the news, but there's a requirement for educators, and that's everyone who works in schools, to get vaccinated or test weekly. So this has to be fully in place by October 15th. And what that means is, as the employer, we have to have the vaccination status documented of our employees. And if their vaccination status is a no, or they prefer not to tell us, then the requirement of us is to test weekly. This was an August 11th mandate by Governor Newsom and the California Department of Public Health. So our preference has always been not to collect this information on employees. Now we're required to per this mandate. We don't plan on sharing it with anyone. So if anyone ever asks, and anyone being in our community or outside, we don't plan on sharing the private information of our staff, but we will have to adhere to the documenting of it, having that information on file, and then participating in the testing for unvaccinated or preferring not to share their status. So that's taking place. We've already actually, like I said, administered a voluntary staff test last week. Daily screening, still part of the guidance. Thank you for adhering to that. That's probably one of the best things we can do to help keep the school open, is if we're seeing symptoms, keep our kiddos home and start there. Masks, I think we've been clear about this, but the current guidance states that regardless of vaccination status, masks are required indoors and they're optional outdoors. And that is for students and adults. The frequent cleaning, disinfecting continues, and even more so, or deeper kind of cleaning and disinfecting if there's a known case that was in any particular space. Ventilation still is recommended, so that's why you'll see our doors open. You'll see us with HEPA filters in the classrooms with only one door, or spaces with only one door, as a common practice as well. And then contact tracing as a practice as well. Nothing new here. So again, thank you for adhering to this daily reminder. At this point, we probably all have it memorized, but this is key to minimizing the spread of most bugs, right? And not just COVID. So let's talk a little bit about contact tracing. It's not a new practice. It's just a practice that's used when there's the intent to kind of track down and better understand the spread of an infectious disease. Helps us identify who's likely exposed to someone with in this case, with the virus. So then through contact tracing, we determined who, if anybody, was a close contact. And the definition of this matters, especially in schools, is there's a definition specific to schools on what a close contact is and what one isn't. So according to the CDC, someone who is within 6 feet of a confirmed infected person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more over 24-hour period. So that means within 6 feet or within the same day, doesn't have to be consecutive, but for more than 15 minutes at a time, or 15 minutes in total in that day, they were exposed to or within 6 feet of this person. But in schools, there's a second part of this definition. The definition, a close contact excludes now individuals within 6 feet if both were wearing masks. So that's the caveat to close contact in schools. And my understanding is, we're still seeing very low transmission rates with children. So the close contact definition has that exclusion for students or for school individuals because of the mask variable. That's the definition. So then, Hold on a second. Hold on. See if I can do a good job being a host here. All right. So that's a close contact, right? As you can imagine. Okay, so you would ask, like, okay, so my child is in classroom with other students. To be considered a close contact, if somebody in there was positive, whether it's a student or an adult or a guest, or whomever it may be, then they would have had to be within 6 feet for over 15 minutes in the same day without masks, with one of them not having masks, maybe both. So for us, since we require masks indoors and our kids are moving and playing at recess, the mealtime is pretty quick where their masks are off and having meals outdoors. We can confidently say that in most cases, if we're adhering to our practices, it's going to be rare to have close contacts by this definition. It can happen, and it'd be naive to think it won't, but by and large, we're sort of set up so that this would be a rare occurrence, not a common one. So now that we kind of have the definition of a close contact, within 6 feet, more than 15 minutes, cumulative, without masks, then we're kind of ready to look at what happens when we determine close contacts. And that's this very busy sheet, so we're going to look at it row by row and make sense of it. How do we determine a positive case? What do the notifications entail? And then what are the quarantine recommendations? Lots going on here, so we're going to go row by row. We'll talk about the scenario, what it means, and then what type of notification happens and what the recommendation is. So when there's a positive case, and that means that we have confirmed positive case, right? We have the results of a test that indicate the individual is positive, or a medical practitioner without the test is saying all of these symptoms are consistent with COVID, we are considering this a positive case. Those are the two ways in which we determine a confirmation of COVID. We do not consider word of mouth confirmation. We do not consider we had an incident in which a student joked about a sibling. And by the way, kids are making sense of these crazy times, oftentimes by joking. And so the student joked about COVID, and before you know it, that word spread that the student's sibling has COVID. And now, of course, that led to a lot of questions and confusion from parents. But that is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a confirmation. If the confirmation is down to two possible ways: the confirmed test or the medical practitioner informing us that they are considering, because of the symptoms and so on, the case to be COVID. That's it. So now, if we know that to be true of an individual, then we do contact tracing. We determine who meets the definition for us, because we operate obviously largely in classrooms. We want to know when was the positive case at school last, 48 hours before symptoms started, and then from exposure as well. And now we have kind of like a window of time in which we need to know who they were around. And so we talk to the adults first, and then that gets us a better sense. And if needed, then we take a closer look and we'll reach out to you to see if we can talk to your child about the fact that we think they may be, been exposed. We get pretty far with the adults, and since we're in classrooms every day, monitoring the learning, the teaching and learning, we also monitoring the adherence to the protocols. And by and large, we're seeing, that we're not seeing close contacts by the definition of the CDPH. But if we determine a positive case and there was close contacts, and that happens to be your child, the first thing you'll get is a phone call from either myself, from our Director of Business Services, Sarah Lopez, or our health, Nina Willis, most likely from one of the three of us. We'll call you to inform you that we believe your child has been directly exposed to a positive individual. And we'll talk to you about the recommendations. That's the call you would get if we believe your child was directly exposed. If the case was in a classroom and we determined, can you mute yourself, please?
Do you want to put pants on her? We could go and I could listen to it some way. Go get your sister some pants.
I think I muted them. Let's see. Busy slide here, but I'll make sure we all can follow it. Coming back up. So if there's a positive case and they happen to be in a classroom, but nobody meets the definition of close contact, we are still going to inform the entire classroom that there was potential for exposure. There was exposure in the classroom setting. You won't get a phone call for that. You'll just receive an email notification with the title classroom notification. And that should tell you, hey, in your child's class, there is a positive case. We'll tell you the last time they were there. And again, if we didn't call you, that's because we didn't determine that there was a close contact. And then the last one, everyone gets notified in the school if there's a positive case. And you will only receive the school-wide notification. This should indicate to you that the individual was not in close contact to your child, you or your child, or that they were not in proximity to them. They do not meet the definition, nor were they in the same class. So as you can see, the closer you are to the case, a positive case, the more correspondence from us you get. You get a phone call, you get the classroom notification, you get the school-wide notification. The less you hear from us about a case, the further your child was from the positive case. So naturally, you want to know in each of those scenarios, what is it that you should do? And these are our already established quarantine recommendations. At all times, we should be monitoring for symptoms. That doesn't change. That's true for any time, right? And that's what our daily checklist is about. So if you are a close contact, then the next thing to look at are the quarantine recommendations. And this is where the California Department of Public Health has different recommendations. For the vaccinated, the recommendation is you don't have to quarantine so long as you remain asymptomatic, right? Nor test. For the unvaccinated, direct exposure, if both parties were wearing a mask, students do not need a quarantine so long as they remain asymptomatic, continue to mask indoors. There's a recommendation to test twice a week for the 10 days during the exposure. And then doesn't pertain to us just yet, but quarantine from extracurricular activities. So this is basically keep coming to school if you remain asymptomatic and you are not a direct close contact. That's what, actually I should take that back. If you were exposed during the indoor time, you could be a close contact, but if you remain asymptomatic and follow these things, you can keep coming to school. That's the recommendation in that scenario. And then lastly, if for unvaccinated where either party was not wearing a mask, then you should quarantine. I'm sorry, I started rereading it, confusing myself. But those, if you remain asymptomatic, and quarantine up to 10 days of the last exposure without testing, or after 7 days, if the test is administered after the 5th day from the last exposure, of course, if the result is negative. And then once if symptoms do develop, the exposed person should isolate, get tested, and contact their healthcare provider. Right? So this is what we would ask you to do if we determine you were a close contact, and then we'd call you and walk you through this right-hand column. All other potential exposures, or wasn't close contact, etc., we would give you the middle column. We don't ask students their vaccination status, so we would just give you this information, and then you would kind of respond from there. A lot to swallow, we totally get it, but all of this is already available on our website, the quarantine recommendations. We're going to add this kind of chart to it so you can see exactly what to expect as well. A lot of info, just want to make sure as you're getting notifications, you know what to look at. So again, closest to the case, the more information you'll get from us. The phone call, the class notification, school-wide. The furthest from the case, you're going to get the school-wide notification. So lastly then, when do we get to return to school? When your child stays home or goes home symptomatic. This is not new. This was true for any other cold virus, flu, etc. At least 24 hours have passed since the resolution of a fever without the use of any medications. So that's a non-negotiable. That starts the list. 24 hours from any fever with no medicine. Improvement of symptoms, also non-negotiable. Those two things, right out of the gates to return. And then now here's where a choice. With a negative test for COVID, you can just return. No fever, 24 hours, symptoms are better, negative test, back to school. On that third one, negative test, if you're not going to do that, healthcare provider has confirmed that it's something else other than COVID, bring us that note, child can come back. Or if you avoid both of those two are not for you, then 10 days since the symptom onset, since the start of the symptoms, they return to school. So the first two bullets apply to in any scenario. The third bullet, you have one of those three choices to look at. That's the current guidance there on returning to school. A lot to take in, right? So we want to make sure that we give you time to kind of soak it all up and hear your thoughts and questions with our remaining time. So I was a little more long-winded than I wanted to be, gang. I gave myself a 25-minute window to speak, and I'm about 7 minutes over that. But what we're going to do now is we're going to open this up to some discussion and questions. So let me figure out how I can open the chat. I forgot how to do that. So I think if I stop sharing, I might be able to figure that out.
We have some hands raised also.
Oh, cool. All right.
Danielle Liso is your first one.
All right.
Yes.
You want to monitor that? Let's go. Take it away, Danielle. Hello.
Okay, my question was just about those slides. It only really mentioned indoor exposure, and indoors the kids are wearing masks. So what about outdoors if you know they're not wearing masks and they're playing outdoors? Is there any guidance for what is considered exposure at that point?
Yeah, so in the school setting, it really kind of boils down to indoor exposure. We'll be, all of our staff is trained to look at if kids are like constantly on one another, like they're not giving each other space at lunch or climbing all over each other, we're separating them and so on. But for the guidance, it really is focusing on the indoor exposure, not the outdoor exposure.
Next is from Jason and Autumn.
Yes, you probably didn't even make it past one.
That wasn't Jason and Autumn.
No.
Just waiting a
Here
second.
you are, yeah. Go ahead, guys.
Okay, I just wanted to comment. I mean, you mentioned a couple points about doing what is necessary to stay open, and you also mentioned safety being number one. So my question is basically, why not go beyond that and offer a safe distance learning program for any parents who might be interested? I mean, it gives the chance for the students to stay enrolled, but it also would relieve just a little bit of the crowdedness in the classrooms as well.
Yeah, the relieving the crowdedness is a really good case for it, right? And this is not an easy kind of position to reach, knowing that there are, if you don't mind, yeah, Jason, we've talked about this, right? And I know that this is, we put families in a tough position where they have to, make a decision of attending Allegiance in our in-person model or looking, for other options because we don't have that option. And the things, kind of behind the scenes that went into that decision have to do with really the larger viability of our school. Like our authorizer approved a school that is 100% in person, and right now are not in favor of us offering another alternative. Now, we also once we knew that this was the direction the legislature was going in and went in, we put our resources into supporting 100%, the students who are showing up to school. we're getting some of the initial data back, and I'll present it at our next board meeting on our kind of beginning of the year academic data. And while I think we did a stellar job relative to many others in distance learning, we're still seeing that our, by and large, our students are not where they would normally be at this point in the school year. So we have quite a bit of work to do. And to do that work, we need them in person. We don't have the resources to offer a comparable, program for kids who stay home. So yeah, it's a fair question. Like, hey, look, you're talking about safety and isn't the safest alternative in some cases to keep kids home? Yes. For us, it comes with these other factors that we have to weigh, and we know that any decision comes at a cost. Jeopardizing the relationship with our authorizer, who will look at our charter and say, you're not obligated to offer this. You're offering something you're not obligated to, and we don't see that as being aligned with your charter. I don't have much reason to believe that there will be much grace there and leniency, and so that's why kind of how we reach this decision. And again, is it popular? Is it in everybody's best interest? No, it puts some awesome families in tough situations, and that is definitely tricky for us. But yeah, we want to, and that's essentially the reasons why where we are. And I fully own that those are not adequate for some of you, and but hopefully you kind of get a sense of where we landed and why, and knowing that it comes at a very real cost.
Thank you. Next is Nevaeh Morales.
Hi, I just had a question. I understand that the close contact guidelines of, the district are what they are, but would the students' parents still have the option to quarantine their child if there was a classroom exposure rather than a close contact exposure?
Gotcha. Yeah. So like, let's say you just get the classroom notification, and so we didn't determine that your kiddo was a close contact, but you're concerned and you want to quarantine them, right?
Yes, because like, for instance, my child is an asthmatic, so
Yeah.
I really have to take extra precautions on that.
Yeah. So that notify us, and we want to better understand that. And if you think your kid's been exposed and needs a quarantine, then yes, that would be consistent with the guidance.
Oh, okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, we're just, as we follow the guidance, we're saying that's not necessary in every instance, right? But
Yes.
there are instances where you may say, well, no, I think it's in the best interest of my kiddo to do just that. And that's, we have students in that situation right now. We have some who started the year in that situation. Others who, who a couple of days in, needed to do that for exposure outside of school, right? That wasn't even at the
Yes.
school, but there was potential exposure. There's not even a positive case in their home, but there was exposure, and so they're doing that. So yes. And thank
Yes.
you for that.
Thank you.
All right, once you've asked your questions, if you could lower your hand so I can see who the next ones are. Dara Diamond, Dr. Cognito.
Thank you. I have two questions. How are you doing contact tracing for 7th grade? I'm sorry if I missed that. For 7th grade, being that the students are moving from classroom to classroom. And then the second part of my question would be for PE, me having a daughter, but they're changing in the PE room. How many students are in the locker room at a time? And what is the ventilation like for the students changing in and out of their PE uniforms? Thank you.
Thanks, Dara. Yeah, the contact tracing is not much different. It's just more classroom, right? More spaces. It actually ends up being more adults that we have to kind of interact with, not necessarily more students, because it's the same group that moves through the day, right? But it ends up being just more adults that were potentially exposed. Unless the positive case is a staff member, then all of those 7th grade classes, right, if they happen to be the staff member they interacted with, would be contacted. And I know we discussed, I don't want to misspeak, but I know we have protocols for the locker room. I think I see Ms. Lohoff unmuted herself. Do Do we need to get the details from the PE teachers? I know we talked to them about it, but I don't know those details.
I would need to get those details as well. I know that it's the same cohorts and that they take turns by cohort going into the locker room. So as you said, it's the same kids traveling from class to class. At least the student population hasn't changed, but it does require us interviewing more teachers.
Yeah. And also the ratio in the locker room, I know, is smaller than the class because of the division of, you know, boys locker room, girls locker room. But Dara, yeah, we'll get more details on what that looks like, because I know there's more information that PE has on that as they kind of built their protocol.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Your next one, and remember, lower your hands if we've already answered your questions, please, unless you have another, is Stacia Comia.
Hi, Dr. Cognetta. I have a question. So for the classrooms that are smaller, like the portable classroom, how are they doing like ventilation and all that stuff? Are you guys thinking of putting plexiglass, or is that even a choice?
Yeah.
Since the classrooms are smaller?
So they look smaller. They're actually not. Square footage, there's like a 2 square foot difference between that and the permanent classrooms. They're not smaller. They just, the shape, whatever, it makes it appear. Yeah, but they're not. And
Okay.
but they do have one door. So that's the challenge, right? So
Yeah.
those are the rooms that have a minimum of one HEPA filter in them, so that we can kind of circulate the air and help filter it out there. But the doors remain open. The
Okay.
filters remain on, and those are the measures, that we took in those rooms. It's really the one door is a challenge, not so much the size, because the size is comparable.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Got it.
All right, next we have Tracy Scott.
Good evening. Hello. I thought I heard you talk earlier about opening the chat. I would love to text you or chat my question individually, and then you can email me a response later, just so I don't, because it's on more of a personal level than a whole school
Sure.
level.
Will you, Tracy, I don't know, I'm embarrassed, but I can't turn it on. I don't know why. So
Oh.
I'll keep figuring it out. Maybe I'll find out why I'm not doing it right. But if I can't figure it out, will you just,
Email you.
email me? Yeah.
Yes. Yes,
Thank
sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Erica Fernandez.
Hi, everybody. I had a question in regards to when the kids are eating lunch. I know there's like no physical distancing. I know CDC hadn't put that in their guidelines, but is there any way that we can distance our kids? Because I know, they're not wearing masks when they're eating, of course, but I'm just, a little, I know that usually like when somebody's eating at a restaurant, there usually is like, 6 people per table, so how can we, help our kids kind of physically distance, even though it's not on CDC guidelines, I know.
Yeah, and that's an area, luckily it's outside and it's open, right, which is helpful.
Right.
We've also talked about, when we can, using other space, especially it's actually our larger bodies where there's more of the older kids, there's more of them in some of the lunches than the younger ones, and so they take up more space. So
yeah,
it's a little more urgent for them than the younger ones, relatively spread out. So the thing that we have going in our favor that aligns with the guidance is the number of minutes that they're actually there eating is not that long. And because there's a stagger to the lunch itself, the kids who bring food go to the tables before the kids who are getting food from us. And so that ends up creating a little bit of a stagger. It's not perfect, right? It's not like you eat for 5 minutes and then you guys come eat for 5 minutes, but it does create a natural stagger to it, to where by the time you got the kids arriving with school lunches, the home lunches are starting to finish up, and then it kind of frees them up a little bit. So those things help. Being outdoors absolutely helps. More tables would help for sure, and more shade, or cover, because then if we ever get out of this drought, we'll get into some rain too, right? But right now it's just trying to stay. So those are the things working, some of them working in our favor, some of them not so much. But the biggest advantage is that it's outdoors, and that is absolutely helpful. And it's not, the amount of time that kids are actually sitting with other kids, depending on who they are, is actually lessened by the fact that you got two kind of sources of lunch, home and the school. And then that takes that 150 kids and almost divides it, not perfectly in half, but an overlapping half. Yeah. So, but again, none of these things are like 100% what we would prefer. They're the best that we're currently able to do with what we have, and that's the amount of minutes in the day, the amount of chairs, or I should say tables, and the amount of kiddos we have. But we'll keep looking for, we have, and there's been quite a bit of shortage of getting us more tables, but we're looking into that too. And if cover for those tables is probably not going to happen anytime soon. So we may have some tables where, they're just kind of exposed to the sun, or obviously we won't have kids eating the rain, but that's kind of where we are with outdoor eating.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Cadence is next. Cadence, you'll have to unmute yourself.
I'll try to come back to Cadence.
Yeah, so let's go to Marissa Bautista.
Hello. So my question is, hello?
Yep, we hear
Yes,
you.
we can
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, so my question is, you had mentioned a little earlier that the kids are not academically where they should be, or something around that nature. So I was just wondering, with that being said, will the parents be given information as to where their child or their kids are at the present time and where they should be? Or is this going to be a discussion during the teacher-parent conferences?
Yeah, so, and Ms. Lohoff can probably speak more to that, but I just want to kind of clarify, I guess, what I shared. I don't want to give the impression that every kid is below where they need to be. But when we're looking at just this early kind of data, what we're seeing is that a quick comparison of previous years, just as a whole, kids are not as far along as they would have been. No surprise though, right? Consider this last year and a half of disruption. This isn't surprising, but it's true. Now we're seeing that it's true that a typical third grader usually starts at this level of fluency. Today's typical third grader's fluency is lower than that. So that's kind of what we're noticing. And again, it's not true for every student and every case at all, but as a whole, right? If we summarize the school as a whole, it's a lower performing school than previous years. And that's just unavoidable given the last year and a half. As far as getting that information, the short answer is yes, but I know I'll let Ms. Lohoff give you more details of what you can expect there.
So hi, everybody. Currently what we are doing is our grade level benchmarks. And that means that we're checking reading fluency, we're checking phonics, we're checking math, we're checking writing. And at the beginning of the year, we always have all these benchmarks. So we've asked the teachers, and we now also have what we call the Innovation Station. That's a group of interventionists that we have placed in position to not only support the classrooms, but to help gather this data and be quite efficient with it so that it can be shared out by the next board meeting. We want to make sure, as far as your triad conferences are concerned, all of that data should be ready to go. That is the week of the board meeting on the 13th is the beginning of triads that week. So you will have access with your teacher who has conducted those benchmarks to be able to speak to each and every individual child, letting you know exactly where they're at and how we're going to move forward to get to that point where we're doing our, making sure that we've identified those kids that would need additional support, as well as those who managed to get through our distance learning program and flourished. As you can understand, there's quite a realm of possibilities there. So our intent is to make sure that we are in a position to apply the supports to each and every student within the school. Did I answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, next we have Dana.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. In speaking of the whole COVID situation and how you're handling things, is there going to be a better protocol on how parents can pick up their child? I feel like every time I go pick up my child, all the adults kind of congregate in that area. And we all know that the children are not really affected. It's more the adults. And so I proposed to Dr. Moss that we do some kind of list of parents that are, as they're coming in, and then that the teachers go down that same list and that's how they, call the child up to the gate, instead of having all the parents congregate in that little small corner, just, waiting anxiously to pick up their child.
Yeah, and Dana's referring to the Oak Street gate, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, and yes, we need to talk about that again and kind of get you guys a little bit cleaner system. I know it's going faster, but it does still mean a big old bubble of people, right? At that.
Yeah, because I think that defeats the purpose of, everybody trying to be safe when the adults are the ones that are the problems, not the children.
Right. Yeah, and we've started to take a look at that, but we haven't kind of turned around and answered just yet, just so that, all right, something as simple as lining up on Oaks or whatever it may be. You obviously want to make eye contact with your kiddo. That helps, and I think now that we're a couple weeks in and it's getting smoother, just knowing, connecting car to child, that makes it faster, right? And the students understand the routine. I think we're ready to tackle this thing too. So give us this week to kind of play around with it, and we'll get something a little bit more efficient out to you guys.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
I don't see any more hands. Oh, I do too. Lizette Guzman.
Hello. I just wanted to get some clarification. You had said that the authorized, is it CVUSD, Chino Valley Unified School District, would not allow you guys or approve us opening up distance learning for parents that would prefer that? Was that correct?
Yeah, in my conversations, it's a strong preference that we don't do it. Now, if we, and we've had conversations just behind the scenes around like the pros and cons of doing it, and so on. So that is a driving factor is our authorizers telling us that, look, it's not part of your program. You're not required to do it. We'd prefer if you don't do it. And so we're kind of interpreting that as, okay, I don't think they're in support of it. And look, if so that's kind of how we've interpreted that, right? Is that we were told by our authorizer who approved this school to be 100% in person is now saying you're back to the school that was authorized, because that's required, right? There's no requirement to offer an alternative program. And so we realize that comes at a cost, though. It does. It means, as we were talking earlier with the question from Jason, that it puts families in tough positions. And I know these families, I care dearly for them. I don't want to see them in this tough position, but we are, we're not, it's not just a local decision that we're making saying we prefer to do this, not that. I'd rather serve, all of our kids and more, but we do have some factors that are limiting what we can't do at this time. So that's my response to that. Is that I don't know if there's any follow-up to that or.
Yeah, okay, no, thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I muted because of a siren. We have Martha Hernandez next.
I have more concern than a question, like on the dismissal and arrival times in the morning. Like today, I needed to stop like 2 times before getting to the crossing guard, because parents are crossing in the middle of the street. So it's just more like concern, not using the crosswalk or not using the corner, just using the middle of the street. Like I said, I stopped like 2 times before getting to the crossing line. It's just more concern than anything.
No,
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Martha. Yeah, and again, I noticed, I'll tell you that from my perspective, the first few days of school, as we're all figuring out how this works, pick up and drop off, the largest part of the congestion is due to just us not following the procedures. And I get it, we don't know them, we're not familiar with them, our timing, all of that. But things like, not using the crosswalk is pretty unsafe. And I think when you have cars that are conditioned to watch for kids and people crossing drivers conditioned to watch for people crossing at the crosswalk, and you're choosing to cross somewhere else, that's just a recipe for bad news. So thank you, Martha, for bringing that up. And I know we're in a hurry to get our kids to school so we can get to work. But there's a reason why these accidents, happen, and they happen close to schools. It's because we're all trained that crosswalk is where people walk. The rest of the street is for cars. And that has, these ugly consequences. So please, please, please adhere to that, to using the crosswalks. And yeah, we'll have staff there. We have them there every day. They'll help your kiddo get across safely. Thanks again, Martha. Fiorella Tello.
There we go. Yep, Fiorella Tello.
Hi, good afternoon. So I have a concern. So you stated that once there is a kid in the classroom that has COVID, the parents will be emailed. But how would I know that other kids in the classroom were not do not have the condition? Like, are the kids going to be tested at least a week later or a couple of days later? Because some of us have smaller kids at home, have elderly people at home, and well, obviously we can't just afford to not work because we have COVID. So I guess that's my main concern. Personally, I thought our kids will be sent to quarantine at least the whole classroom for 10 days or 2 weeks to keep them safe, to keep all of the kids in the classroom safe. So I was just a little surprised when you guys said it's just gonna be an email being sent.
Well, again, if you look at what I didn't share was the when a classroom is closed, and I'll talk a little bit about that. But before that, if anyone that was determined to be a close contact, so someone who we believe was exposed beyond, closer than 6 feet, one of them not wearing a mask for more than 15 minutes in the day, you would get any of those exposures, those individuals who were exposed would get a call and would be recommended to not recommended, they'd be expected to quarantine. That would be the case. What wouldn't be the case is the entire class getting shut down for one positive case. That because we are masked indoors and we are cleaning and so on. So that's consistent with the guidance. That's not us fudging the guidance or changing it. That is the guidance. In regards to, if there are 3 cases and they're connected in the classroom, we'll shut the classroom down. And any siblings outside of that, they will be quarantining too. That is in the guidance as well. So there are times in which a classroom would have to quarantine, but it's not as simple as like one positive case in that classroom. That's just not the guidance today. It was in the past.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's a lot to hang on to, right? And if we would have had this meeting a month ago, I would have been telling you different things because the guidance changes. So that's just the times we're in.
All right, next week, let's go back to Cadence.
Hi, how's it going? I was wondering, is there any way we could go about donating some air purifiers for our class or our kids' classrooms?
Yeah, so we have them in all of the rooms so the short answer is yes, we'll take it because we'll put them to use. But I do, I want to say we're going to make sure that they're in places that, let's say one goes out or something like that, which could always happen. Rather than the rooms that are ventilated with 2 doors are still just in better shape than a one door classroom, right? That's why we have the ventilators in there. So we'll definitely take your donations, but I think if you're okay with us kind of putting it to use in the greatest priority area, and if that's like, no, I meant for my kids' class, then I'd have to say that we might have to find ourselves with what is now and we're grateful for it, our filter. We would like to put it in the area of greatest need, rather than.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So would I just drop it off in the office, or how does that work?
Ms. Lohop, do you have a preference where it gets dropped off?
If you'll just let them know that you're coming to drop that off at the office, because the office right now is only accepting, if you'd have to knock on the door. I don't necessarily need for you to make an appointment for that, but if you'll knock on the door and let people know that you're going to be coming, or else email
okay
there, that would be amazing. Thank you.
Okay, Sounds great. Thanks.
Sure. Next, we have Celeste Lyons.
Yes, hi. So my question was, when school was determined to restart, it was due to the Delta variant not being appeared at the time. Now that we have the Delta variant and a lot of parents are concerned about their kids' safety at school, how would it go if you were to remove your child from the school and then until they can get the situation under control? And then would you be put at the bottom of the waiting list again, or would your kid not be able to come back to the school? How does that work?
Yeah, so if you disenroll for whatever reason, and regardless of the reason, if you disenroll your student, they would go to, if you choose to come back, be treated as a student who's never been enrolled in our school. So they'd kind of, if we have a wait list at that grade level, they'd be at the end of the wait list. So I think that's an example of a lot of the COVID specific laws and exceptions of last year. They're just gone. They're not in place. There's some health guidance, but this push by the legislature, by the governor to get back in person, resulted in a lot of the legislation that gave us some leniency on things like that, on offering distance learning and all of the different things that we were able to do to respond in the last 18 months. Those are largely gone. What's in place now are health guidance and essentially a return to school as usual with those health requirements. But I keep interchanging those words. That's only because for us, they are requirements for our agreement with our authorizer. So yeah, disenrolling a student is something that would, even for this reason, unfortunately means that they've lost their spot, and they kind of have to, if you choose to return, come back and apply again. And this is not at all fun to discuss, and I feel like our hands are tied, and we've gone round and round. And I know again, the super important, the tough position that some of our families are in with the limitations that we just have in this year, not sitting well with us, and not at all easy to kind of just move forward with. It's just where we are right now, and we can't allow someone to disenroll and give them their spot back, even in these times.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Celeste.
All right, next you have Annie.
Hi, so I was looking at the previous slide about the 3 guideline. If you have, the kids have fever, so in order for you to come back, it has to be clear of those 3, fever and improvement of symptom and also COVID tests. Well, and my question is I'm also looking at the self-assessment, and over there it does not say something like runny nose. So if the kid is out because of runny nose and we just want to keep them at home, and when we want to come back, do we have to follow those 3? And also, what about if there is a sibling? What's the guidance on the sibling if the sibling has no symptom? Thank you.
Yeah, good questions. And first thing with the returning to school, it's the 2 first bullets. So no fever for 24 hours without medicine. Whatever symptoms were in place have improved, and then a negative COVID test, or your doctor says that it's something else that's causing the symptoms, or 10 days from the symptoms. The last bullet is one of those 3, okay? But definitely 24 hours after fever, improvement of symptoms, and then one of the last 3, the test, the doctor diagnosing something else, or 10 days from the symptoms, start of the symptoms. On that. So Annie, I'm going to make sure I follow you had a second part to your question around, can you repeat the second part of your question?
Yeah, on the daily assessment, it does not mention something like runny nose. And I know like over the year, kids get runny nose a lot, especially during some season. So how do we navigate that? Like, say I have my kid's runny nose and I keep him or her at school, and then when does he or she gets to come back?
Yeah, so yeah, the runny nose interest is not on that list, right? So oftentimes the runny nose accompanies sneezing and so on, and then it would be the list, correct? But it's not on the list. So anything that's not on the list is not part of the daily self-assessment. So a runny nose, which maybe oftentimes is tied to allergies, would not be a reason, that alone would not be a reason to keep your child home. If you choose to be cautious, then sure, inform us, and we'll go from there. but that as a standalone symptom is not on that list. And I think you said something about siblings as well, right? Can you ask that part of your question for me?
Right. So if one kid have runny nose, we decided to keep him or her home. And then what about the sibling with no symptoms?
Okay, and you're wondering, do I keep them home or not?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, if that symptom is not on our list, you are free to use your discretion if you want to send either kid to school. If it's a symptom accompanying others, then let's make sure those symptoms aren't on the daily checklist. But in that scenario, you have discretion for both kiddos on what you choose, what you feel is best.
I see. So if the symptoms are not on the assessment, say that, for example, I keep my kiddo at home because of runny nose, and the next day he feels better, no symptoms on the assessment, I can send him or her back?
Right.
Okay, got it. Without the doctor's note or coffee test or anything?
Correct.
No fever, right?
Correct, because the symptom that you kept them home for isn't on the list.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Lyons, do you have a second question? I see your hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to take my hand down.
No worry. Next, we have Danielle.
Hi, I'm sorry. I'm trying to navigate this thing. On the self-assessment, it did say congestion and runny nose as a symptom. So is that not something we need to keep them home for?
If I missed it, I'm sorry, then it would be a.
I literally had that issue this morning. So I pulled up the self-assessment and it said congestion, runny nose.
Pulling it up. I've not seen it on ours, but I'm curious if there's just like a previous edition out there and make sure we're all looking at the same one.
Maybe I was looking at an old one.
Possibly so, but you know what we'll do, just so we're all on the same page, we'll push out the latest one to everybody and we'll work off that, because that's what I have in front of us and I don't see it on there, but you obviously see it in front of you. At one point it was included. Am I sharing my screen right now, by the way?
I think it was off of the COVID case emails that came out school-wide.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and that,
And it
yeah,
said
that
symptoms
has.
of COVID-19 and just, you know, the whole list and congestion, runny nose.
Okay, yeah.
I think I went off of that.
Well, yeah, let us clean that up for you so you have one consistent list. Because can you see my slide right now?
No, you're not presenting.
Oh, I thought I was presenting stuff.
Here you go.
This is taken from the last updates from the California Public Health. So the letter, which is not a new letter, those letters came out in the spring, may have an earlier attachment or list. So let us shore that up for you guys so that you're getting the most consistent or more current list there. I apologize for that. As you can see, a lot of moving parts, right? We got the letters to go out. Yeah, and but yeah, we'll clean that up. Thank you for
Thank you so much. Okay.
And we have Merlin.
Hi, I just have a question. Do the kids get temper checks in class? Because my daughter's in kindergarten, so she doesn't tell me. I was just wondering, and if not, do you think we can start implementing in class? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So temperature checks is not a requirement in the guidance. So we do temperature checks in the health office. Teachers do have thermometers in the class and can, but it's not a requirement of them to temperature check their students. Some haven't since we opened in the spring, and I don't know if any have this in the first 2 weeks of the school year, but teachers have at times just taken out the thermometer and checked kiddos. But we prefer to do that in the health office, so we don't do it for all students in the classroom, per again the guidance.
Okay, thank you.
Yaleen has another question for you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I just have a question regarding recess and lunch. So So I'm not sure the kids get to eat first. I know for lunch for sure, a lot of kids that they play first and then they eat. But I don't think they, my kids is in second grade, so I don't think he remembers to go to wash his hand first and before eating. So is that a way that we can close the playground for now for them to play first and eat? Or like I don't know how are we doing this, but I'm just raising a concern here.
Ms. Love, you want to talk a little bit about lunch sequence?
Yes, I can help with that. So we do have a station out there that when the kids come in from the lunch or from the playground, our proctors that are there at lunchtime are directing them to take care of their hands prior to sitting down to eat. My hope is that they're all doing that. It definitely is something that I can reiterate to our proctors that are out there too. But we do have a station set up right there for the kids to be able to clean their hands.
Okay, great. What about recess? Is that the same? They eat their snack first and then go play, or
yes,
and then come back and wash their head?
Yes. So when they from the classroom with clean hands, they go to break. And then they eat their snack first and then go play. And then as they enter the classroom again, they're using hand sanitizer as they go through the door.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Do we have any other questions? Danielle, do you have another question?
No, sorry, I need to put my hand down.
No worries.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have anyone else with questions?
That looks like that's it, right?
I think so.
Yeah. Good. Ms. Loff, any last thoughts on your part?
No, other than the fact I'm thrilled that the school is open, that our cases are so minimal and not connected class to class. And I just really appreciate the support of everyone. Please continue to ask your questions and email us. That would be great. Any emails that do come to me, I forward directly to Dr. Cognetta, and he is that voice for everyone, making sure that it is the same communication that's going out, a consistent communication. So please feel free to send your emails.
Thank you for that. Yeah, and a huge thank you to all of you for attending and asking your questions. It's super important for us to know, what are the things that are occupying your time and concerning you, and also hopefully where we are effective in earning your trust and you're having faith in us that we are doing everything we can to keep your kiddos safe and learning and where we believe they need to be, which is in school. And I want to own that it's a tricky time. I've always been comfortable with the idea that you can't make everybody happy, but not to this extent. This is a different time. This is obviously we're dealing with people's health and so many. The impact of that is so great that this is a tricky time to navigate. And so I appreciate everyone's input, their flexibility, their understanding. It goes a long way to help us, kind of roll up our sleeves and get to work for your kiddos. I noticed there's quite a bit of staff here, so I thank them for giving us a little bit extra time too. I know they want to hear from you. They want to hear your thoughts and concerns and so on. And
we do have one more question popped up.
One more. Let's go.
Aubrey?
Take it. I can take that interruption for a question for sure.
Sorry.
It's not a question, more of a comment for the last person that was asking about washing hands. I put an individual hand sanitizer in my child's lunches so that they can use it just in case they fall through the cracks with hand washing or whatnot. It's just a helpful tip. Some people might find it useful.
Thank you, Aubrey. That's a very helpful tip.
Helpful tip. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Yeah, I just want to end there with just our commitment to you guys. I think we're going to keep just kind of hearing all the different perspectives and staying clear on our priority of keeping the school open for your children. I know we use the word safe a lot, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase one of our board members here who made it very clear for me when he used this phrase last year, Jason Liso, he spoke about safety being subjective. And we try to operate outside of subjectivity and just go very clear. That's why I want to share with you the data where we are. We've had 3 positive cases in each instance. Those cases have shown up to school with COVID. My hope is that this continues where we have 0 transmission at school. Schools are largely not vectors of this, which is a great thing to know. But of course, they're not immune from it. Kids can spread it. People can spread it at a workplace, including schools. Luckily, it's a place where the spread is relatively lower than when it involves children, thankfully. We're still going to be cautious. We're not going to be reckless about it. Those of you who have differing opinions in what we're implementing, I hope it's clear where we're kind of coming from, where we're obligated to follow the guidance. There's plenty in the guidance I'll let you know that I agree fully with, and there's plenty in there that doesn't make much sense to me, but I don't have the luxury of picking and choosing.
Yeah.
We have an obligation to you to keep your kids' school open, and this is at this time.
I don't even have a chair or a blanket or nothing.
So wanted to make sure
We do have one more question. Mona was up there.
Was she? Oh.
Yeah. Mona, are you still there?
That's her time.
Yes.
Oh, you are there.
Just a quick question. I don't want to sound like a big Debbie Downer, but how many children have to be ill or staff before the school would have to close? God forbid.
Yeah, it's there is a threshold, right? Like I said, the 3 in the class, and then there's a percentage. What was the latest? Percentage of classrooms with positive cases at one time. I think it's a quarter of the classes, like 25% of the classrooms having a positive case shuts the whole school down. If I'm not mistaken. That's been revised recently, but there is a number, and I'll dig it up.
One classroom or the whole school?
Say that again.
Of just one classroom?
So there's a scenario in which the classroom is closed down, and that is in a short span of, I think within a week, 3 or more positive cases in that room could shut the whole classroom.
Good. Hope it don't get there.
Yeah, there's a place, and I know this has been revised, so Mona, I may have the wrong numbers, but this number exists, and I know where to find it. So I know it exists, and we have it, but I just want to make sure I'm not quoting like an older number because it has been revised. And then there's a scenario where there are so many classrooms that have positive cases at the same time, right? Or within a window, and then that could result in closing of the school. And in both the classroom scenario and the closing of the school scenario, we would be following county health directives there, and we would be directed to close. We share that information and then come back and tell us whether we have to close or not.
Hopefully not, but thank you.
Yeah, so thank you, everyone. I want to make sure we have these opportunities, and maybe we need to have these, more frequently than we anticipated. When we first closed, we were having conversations with the community pretty frequently because there was so much uncertainty and change and unknowns. Now that we're back in person, there's still uncertainty, of course, and there's a lot of things that we're all discovering as we're all diving in and opening the school. But I just want to make sure everyone on this call understands that our purpose for having it twofold, right? To share, hopefully clarify information that the school's doing, actions that we're taking, clarify those for you. And then the second purpose for us to get useful information to make sure that we're addressing our community's concerns and so on. Again, I cannot state it enough for families who find themselves in a tricky position. Just know that we're continuing to work to make this work for you. And I know we're up against some tricky, kind of tough decisions possibly with whether Allegiance is the right place. I hope it is for you. If you're here, we want you here. So know that we'll continue to work to see what can be done there. And then, yeah, just huge thank you. You've been with us through this. Last 18 months have introduced a lot of different challenges, and those haven't really gone away. They've just shifted, right? We can now say we're in person, but we've got, other challenges, some imposed on us that, that we don't make much sense. Others make perfect sense, and everything in between. So I have to say, I am fortunate enough to get into classrooms just about every day. And I've been in every classroom more than once, in the last 2 weeks. Ms. Lohoff can say that, others on here can say the same thing. And I'll tell you, like all these headaches about figuring out guidance and when to do what, totally worth it. To see your kids learning and back together is absolutely worth all of these tricky things that we have to work through. And I'm grateful to do this work for you guys and with you guys. So thank you for joining us tonight. If we missed any questions, I just please do not hesitate to email me. If it's a question from Ms. Lohoff, you'll see me forward it to her. But if it's for me, I'm going to get back to you as soon as I can. Yeah, thanks again. And everyone, please have a great night.
Thank you.